We are standing in the middle of the largest industrial corpse on the planet, Detroit, East Grand Boulevard. 325,000 square miles of ringing silence. Stalkers call this place the Temple of Decay. But the true horror of this place isn't that it is dead. The horror is what it used to be. 80 years ago, they didn't just birth cars here, they birthed deities. Packard was the American Rolls-Royce, costing twice as much as a Cadillac. It was the official choice of Russian czars, US presidents, and gangsters, who valued speed above the law. Owning this machine wasn't buying transportation. It was an initiation into a caste of untouchables. But on August 15th, 1956, the heart stopped. The assembly line froze, and a great empire instantly turned into a ghost. The strangest thing about this murder is that Packard didn't die in the Great Depression, when everyone was going bankrupt. And not in the war. It collapsed dead in the middle of the fattest, wildest economic boom in history, when money in America was practically lying on the ground. How can you starve to death at a feast? The killer didn't come from the outside. It wasn't competitors, and it wasn't a crisis. The enemy was sitting in a boardroom chair wearing an expensive silk suit. This is a story about how arrogance kills faster than a bullet. We will show you the murder weapon, one specific contract, a single signature under which turned gold into concrete dust. Welcome to the autopsy of the American dream. Act 1. Origins. To understand the DNA of this brand and why its fall was such a tragedy, we need to rewind time and look into the eyes of its creator. James Ward Packard. Forget the popular myth of self-taught garage geniuses in greasy coveralls. Packard was a man of a different breed. This was the American intellectual elite of the late 19th century. A graduate of prestigious Lehigh University, a tough pragmatist, a brilliant electrical engineer. Even before building his first car, he was already rich. He owned Packard Electric, a company that manufactured complex cables and incandescent lamps. And here lies the key to everything. This is a critically important detail. The mechanics of that time were a crude science. A steam engine could hiss, knock, have a finger's width of play, but it kept working. Electricity, no. In electrical engineering, one mistake, one bad contact, one faulty insulation means a short circuit, fire, death. Working with high voltage instilled in Packard a maniacal, almost sickly drive for perfectionism. For him, the phrase, good enough, was a personal insult. The legend began in 1898. And it began, as is the custom in great stories, with a conflict. James, being a progressive man, bought himself a Winton automobile. At that time, Alexander Winton was the king of the auto industry. But the joy of the purchase died on the very first mile. The car broke down on the way home. It boiled over, sputtered, the chain snapped, oil leaked. Packard was furious. For him, such technical incompetence was a challenge. He didn't just return the car. He sat at his desk, took ink, and drafted a highly detailed list of engineering improvements. With this list, he appeared at Alexander Winton's office. Winton, tired of eternally whining customers, looked at this pedantic upstart in glasses and made the biggest mistake of his life. He arrogantly waved him off. "If you are so smart, Mr. Packard, why don't you build a car yourself?" He thought he had put a customer in his place. In reality, he signed his company's death warrant. It stung Packard's pride. He accepted the challenge. He returned to his factory in Warren, Ohio, cleared a corner in the shop, and told his brother, "We will show them how machinery should work." The result was the Model A, rolling out the gates in 1899. It immediately stood head and shoulders above the competition. Packard introduced automatic spark advance, a technology no one else had. He invented the H-pattern gear shift, the very one the whole world uses to this day. But the main thing was the quality. The cars didn't break. They worked like Swiss watches. When potential buyers, taught by bitter experience, asked for proof of reliability, Packard forbade his managers from proving anything or bragging. he ordered them to answer with a single phrase. Ask the man who owns one. No marketing, no lies, just an honest recommendation. This slogan became more than just an ad. It was a philosophy of absolute transparency upon which the reputation was built for the next 50 years. The success was deafening. The little shop in Ohio was bursting at the seams. In 1903, investors brought Packard to Detroit. But James didn't just need a factory. He needed a temple of quality. He hired architect Albert Kahn. Kahn revolutionized construction. For the first time in the world, reinforced concrete structures were used for an industrial building. No brick, no wood, only concrete, steel, and glass. Giant windows flooding the space with natural light. Space. Ventilation. This building was named the Palace of Light. It became the standard for the entire global industry. This factory was a physical extension of James Packard's personality. Powerful, innovative, and built to last for ages. They had a genius founder. They had the best factory on the planet. But to become true kings of the road, they needed to create a heart, an engine that would silence all competitors once and for all. ST2. The Ascent, 1915. While Europe was plunging into the trench hell of World War I in Detroit, Packard engineers were preparing a technical knockout. They unveiled the Twin 6 model, the world's first production car with a V12 engine, 12 cylinders. At the time, that was like putting a nuclear reactor in a carriage. Why such complexity? For balance. Competitors at Cadillac made powerful V8s, but they vibrated. They growled. The 12-cylinder Packard floated down the road with the smoothness of a steamroller and the dynamics of a locomotive. There is a legend, and it is true. You could balance a coin on its edge on a running Twin 6 engine, and even if the driver stepped on the gas, the coin wouldn't fall. There was no vibration. There was only pure energy. This engineering miracle instantly rendered all other luxury cars obsolete. Cadillac, Pierce Arrow, they all suddenly seemed like crude crafts from the last century. The 20s arrive. The Jazz Age, Prohibition, F. Scott Fitzgerald. This was a time of Packard's total dominance. They sold more ultra-luxury class cars than all other global manufacturers combined. Packard became an integral part of the roaring 20s landscape. This was the Great Gatsby's car, a symbol of success that required no proof. If you pulled up to a hotel in a Packard, doormen opened doors wider and policemen saluted. The company formed the so-called 3 Ps of American luxury: Packard, Peerless, Pierce Arrow. But even among equals, Packard was first, the undisputed leader of the pack. They exported their limousines to 60 countries. A Packard stood in the Japanese emperor's garage. Later, Stalin's garage would feature ZIS cars, copied from the Packard. It was the global benchmark. Profits were colossal. Dividends flowed like a river. The board of directors was in euphoria. They were sure they had created a perpetual profit machine. Our clients are the richest 1% of people on the planet, they said, lighting cigars. Crises concern the poor. The elite will always have money. They were on top of the world, bathing in gold and glory. They felt like gods. But none of the directors, raising glasses of champagne, saw October 1929 approaching. A hurricane that was about to destroy the very idea of luxury. ACT-3. Greatness. The Great Depression hit America like a tsunami. In a single day, millions in fortunes turned to dust. The luxury market didn't just drop, it vanished. Look at the graveyard of brands from that time. The majestic Peerless, closed, becoming a brewery. Pierce Arrow, bankrupt. The legendary Duesenberg, dead. Packard stood on the edge of that same abyss. The factory went quiet. And to survive, management made a decision that still causes debate among historians. In 1935, they released the 120 model. It was the first affordable Packard. It cost 3 times less than the flagship limousines. From a tactical standpoint, it was a genius move. The 120 became a life raft. It brought the factory necessary cash, loaded the assembly line, saved thousands of jobs. But strategically, it was a Trojan horse. The appearance of a mass-market Packard began to slowly, like acid, corrode the brand's elitism. Imagine, you are a banker. You bought an exclusive limousine for huge money to underscore your status. You drive out onto the street and see that your clerk, your dentist, your neighbor are driving a car with the exact same radiator grille and the same badge. The magic was gone. Owners of expensive limousines no longer felt chosen. The brand began to descend from Olympus into the crowd. But there was no time for reflection. The world went mad again. World War II began. And here, the plant on East Grand Boulevard showed its true power. It transformed into the arsenal of democracy. The government entrusted Packard with the holy of holies, the production of the legendary Rolls-Royce Merlin aircraft engines, the very heart that beat in the chest of the P-51 Mustang fighters. The British doubted. Can the Yanks assemble our incredibly complex motor? It requires hand-fitting. Packard engineers didn't just copy it. They redesigned the technology. They made it so that engines with jewelry-level tolerances could be assembled on a conveyor belt. Every worker knew the life of a pilot over Europe depended on the quality of his work. By 1945, the company emerged from the war an absolute triumph. They had an impeccable patriot reputation. They didn't have a cent of debt. Accounts were bursting with war profits. It seemed they were invulnerable. They won the war. They preserved their capital. But in this euphoria of victory, while counting money, they missed one small but fatal moment. While Packard rested on its laurels in the closed studios of General Motors, designers were already drawing the future. A future with tail fins, chrome, and panoramic glass. A future where there was no longer a place for the conservative Packard. ACT-4. Signals of change. Post-war America wanted a party. Soldiers returned home, and they wanted to live fast and bright. Cadillac caught this nerve of the era. In 1948, they released cars with fins inspired by P-38 Lightning fighters. It was style. It was aggression. It was sex. And Packard? In the post-war race, Packard made a fatal design error. They continued to produce conservative, rounded automobiles. Their design was nicknamed the inverted bathtub. The board of directors, consisting of venerable old men, was afraid to take risks. They thought solidity was more important than fashion. And the brand began to age rapidly, along with its audience. Young millionaires, Texas oilmen, rock and roll stars, none of them wanted a Packard. It became Grandpa's car, boring, reliable, and hopelessly outdated. In 1952, James Nance was called in to save the situation. A new CEO, a tough, ambitious man who came from the home appliance industry. He sold refrigerators and stoves, and he knew how to sell a lot. Nance immediately understood the layout. Alone, Packard wouldn't survive. Against the big three giants, GM, Ford, Chrysler, you need an army. You need scale. Packard had handcrafted production, high quality, and high costs. They couldn't compete on price. Nance dreamed big. He wanted to create America's fourth auto conglomerate, to unite all independent manufacturers into one fist. He began looking for a merger partner. He needed production volume, a dealer network, and the ability to cut costs. His ambitions were right. The logic was ironclad. But the choice of target proved fatal. His gaze fell on the independent company Studebaker, the oldest brand, huge factories, mass market. On paper, it looked perfect. Nance thought he was buying a strong partner to seize the market. He thought this was the foundation for a new empire. But he didn't know one thing. He didn't know he was signing a contract with a dead man. ACT-5. The fall, 1954. The deal of the century. Packard buys Studebaker. The press is in raptures. stocks are rising, champagne flows in Detroit hotels. But it was all a lie. Due to haste, due to incredible pressure from Nance, who wanted to close the deal as fast as possible, the audit, the check of the partners' finances, was conducted superficially, negligently. The terrible truth surfaced only when the ink on the papers had already dried and the merger legally took place. Packard accountants opened Studebaker's real books, and their faces turned white. The company was in a catastrophic state. Their factories were obsolete and inefficient. Unions had negotiated unrealistic wages. But the most terrifying thing was the numbers. The production cost of a single Studebaker car exceeded the price at which it was sold in the showroom. Think about that. Every time a car rolled off the assembly line, the company lost money. Packard had fallen into a trap. Huge financial reserves accumulated over decades of flawless work, those very war millions, began to fly down the drain with a whistle. Money didn't go to developing new models, didn't go to advertising, didn't go to modernizing the plant. It simply burned in the furnace of Studebaker's losses. The healthy Packard organism began to die from blood loss, trying to revive the partner's corpse. In 1955, Nance attempts a last, desperate breakthrough. He orders the release of technologically revolutionary models. The new torsion-level ride suspension. The car literally floated over the road on electric motors linking the front and rear wheels. A new, powerful V8. The design became modern, predatory. These were supposed to be the best cars in the world. But they had no more time for tests, and no money to tune the equipment. The cars went into production raw, and the catastrophe began. An epidemic of breakdowns. Innovative transmissions broke after 1,000 miles. Engines knocked due to defective oil pumps. Suspension electronics went haywire. Dealers were drowning in warranty claims. Customers who paid a premium price were furious. "You sold me a bucket of bolts," they screamed into telephone receivers. The reputation of absolute reliability, the very one James Packard established in 1899. That, ask the man who owns one. It was destroyed, burned to the ground in just 12 months. By the end of 1955, the register was empty, the reputation ruined. Bankers were panic-closing credit lines, refusing to lend to the dying giant. Only one way out remained. A way out that, for people who loved Packard, was scarier than bankruptcy. This way out was disgrace. ACE-T 6. The crash, August 15, 1956. Remember this date. This is the day the giant died. Detroit, East Grand Boulevard. The legendary factory, the pride of Albert Kahn, that very palace of light, stops the assembly line. Silence fell instantly. It was heavy, like a tombstone. Thousands of workers walked out onto the street. Many were crying, not because they lost their jobs, but because they understood they had lost a part of their soul. It was the end of an era. Inside the factory, looting, sanctioned by management, began. Equipment was sold for pennies. Unique blueprints, archives, documentation, all of it was piled up and burned or simply thrown into the landfill. Production was moved to Indiana, to the Studebaker plants. The great factory went dark, turning into a cold, dead concrete box that began to slowly rot. But the brand's agony didn't end there. Management decided to squeeze the last juices out of the famous name, defiling it one last time. In 1957 and 1958, they released ugly hybrids. The people instantly coined a contemptuous nickname for them: Packard Bakers. What was it? These were cheap, narrow Studebaker bodies. They simply slapped a noble Packard badge on them, added a little extra chrome, put a double price tag on it, and put it in showrooms. It was an open betrayal of the buyer. It looked pathetic, like dressing a king in a jester's costume. Instead of wood, plastic. Instead of leather, vinyl. The market responded in the only possible way: total, complete ignoring. Sales dropped almost to zero. No one wanted to pay for a fake. In the summer of 1958, corporate leadership quietly, without much noise, removed the name Packard from the company title. The great brand was buried without honors. There was no salute, no obituary. They just took down the signs. Packard died. But its body, its giant body, the factory on East Grand Boulevard, remained. It remained to rot in the middle of Detroit, becoming the set for a new, much darker chapter of American history. ACT-7. Aftermath and moral decades passed. The ruins of the Packard plant found a second life, life after death. It became a global symbol of industrial decay. Directors came here to shoot post-apocalyptic movies. No need to build sets. Here, in the echoing halls, raves thundered in the 90s. Youth danced on the bones of industry to the sounds of techno. Looters roamed here, gnawing copper and steel out of the walls, dragging history away for scrap metal. The famous bridge over the boulevard became an icon of ruin, a photo printed in every economics textbook as an example of what happens when a dream dies. This place became a frightening reminder. A reminder that nothing lasts forever. Even the most powerful empires, built of reinforced concrete and money, can turn to dust if they lose their way. Today, as the last walls are demolished by bulldozers, we say goodbye to the physical body of the legend. The lesson of Packard is cruel but fair. This company didn't perish because of external enemies, not because of a crisis. It perished because it betrayed its principles. They betrayed their quality for the sake of mass appeal. They betrayed their pride for the sake of a dubious partnership. By trying to be for everyone, Packard ceased to be a dream for the chosen. And when you stop being a dream, you become just iron. But walk into any major technical museum today, or visit a private collection. Find a 1934 Packard 12 there. Turn the key. The engine will wake up with the same quiet, confident whisper as 100 years ago. It works perfectly. Corporations die. Factories crumble. Humans make mistakes. But true craftsmanship is immortal.